Okay, let's unpack this. You've given us this really fascinating question, and a stack of articles, research notes, all circling around Spike Lee, the filmmaker, obviously, the legendary Knicks superfan. And the question is he actually holding the team back from winning?
Yeah, it's provocative. And this deep dive, it's really about us sifting through all that material you send over, trying to
Yep.
pull out the most important bits, the key
Right.
insights.
Think of it like a shortcut for you to kind of get a handle on this pretty complex relationship.
Exactly. Between one of basketball's most recognizable fans and his team, a team he's famously passionate about.
So our mission really is to dig into the team's performance, how they're actually playing, and then look at Lee's interactions, the high-profile stuff, and the broader impact the sources talk about, just to see, is there any actual truth to this idea that his passion, maybe even his criticism, might be doing more harm than good?
hmm We'll definitely look at that passion. It's undeniable. And how his influence gets, well, amplified. Those courtside moments, the controversies, they're memorable. And then weigh all that against the team itself, their chemistry, how they're playing, especially now, right, in this 2025 playoff run.
Yeah, because what's really fascinating here, and it comes through in the material, is just how much debate one fan's presence can spark. Is it inspiration?
Or is it distraction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's dive in.
All right, so the foundation for all this is crystal clear from the stuff you shared. Spike Lee's love for the Knicks, it's absolutely legendary, no question.
Right. The material makes that totally clear. Season tickets way back in '85. He's a fixture courtside. You see him in the orange and blue.
Yeah, and there's even that detail, he was apparently at Game 7 of the 1970 finals. As a kid, saw their first championship.
Wow. That's decades of commitment.
It really is. He's almost, synonymous with the whole courtside scene at MSG, often right there with other celebs.
And it's funny, his absence from Game 1 of these 2025 conference finals, because he was a con.
Yeah,
Right?
for a film premiere.
That actually just highlighted how much he's usually there.
Yeah.
People really noticed he was gone.
And that brings us right to the interesting part the material gets into, this passion. It feels like maybe a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, that intensity, it's powerful, sure. But some fans, some analysts quoted in these pieces you shared, they wonder if the sheer amount of attention, his visibility, especially when he's critical, maybe that puts undue pressure on the team.
On social media, it just blows that up.
Right.
Massively. We saw examples pulled from his Twitter feed, like praising Julius Randle after a big game back in April 25. But then also you could feel the frustration after that really tough OT loss to the Pacers just now, May 21st.
Yeah.
That constant public commentary.
Yeah.
It reaches millions instantly.
It totally puts the team under a microscope, doesn't it? And the fact that the Knicks are in the conference finals, first time since 2000, that just dials up the scrutiny anyway. His outspoken nature makes it even more intense. So the question comes up again, does that high wattage enthusiasm actually motivate, or does it just add this extra layer of stress when the stakes are already sky high?
Exactly. How does that very public fan support, especially from someone that famous, how does it genuinely impact the players, the coaches, when they're already navigating immense pressure?
And speaking of pressure, visibility. His courtside seat has led to some genuinely high-profile moments, controversies even. The most famous one that pops up, obviously, is that whole thing with Reggie Miller, historically.
Oh, yeah, that 1994 Eastern Conference Finals moment. Miller hits those threes in Game 5, gives Spike the choke sign. It's absolutely iconic. Part of basketball lore. It kind of defined that whole Knicks-Pacers rivalry back then.
And here's where it gets wild, right? That rivalry, it got reignited in this 2025 series.
Yeah. Tyrese Halliburton, he mimicked the exact same gesture after Game 1.
Right. And the reports, from ESPN, they highlighted Lee's historical role in setting up that whole dynamic, that trash talk vibe. It makes you wonder, does that back and forth energy, does it actually bleed onto the court? Does it distract the players in crunch time?
And it's not just Miller. There are other incidents mentioned in the material, like the public criticism of David Fizdale back when he was coach in 2019. That apparently created some tension.
I remember that.
And more recently, 2023, That run-in with a fan at MSG, the one that got him ejected, that was all over the place.
Yeah, it was. And posts on X, Twitter.
Yeah.
They were referenced in the material. Some fans point to stuff like that and call it disruptive. Some even use the word curse, which is strong, but...
It is strong. And look, these are maybe isolated events over decades, but they do feed into this narrative, this persistent idea that his behavior could potentially be a liability, could affect the team's focus.
But then, conversely, the material also gives us a strong counterpoint. His support has clearly fired players up sometimes.
Yep.
His vocal backing of Julius Randle, remember that 2020-21 season? Randle had that huge All-NBA year.
Yeah, most improved player, too.
Right. And that directly coincided with a big resurgence for the Knicks.
And Jalen Brunson, I mean, he's been the absolute heart of this team in the 25 playoffs.
Yeah.
He's publicly talked about the energy Spike brings to the Garden.
Yeah, the material noted the Knicks' resilience, too. Like that 17-point comeback attempt in Game 1, even though they lost, it suggests that the passionate fan base, and Lee's a big part of that, contributes to that fight. That never-say-die attitude.
So you see this really fascinating duality laid out in the sources. His presence, it can definitely fire up the crowd, maybe the team too. But the controversies, the high-profile stuff, could that, in theory, kind of chip away at the good stuff?
Which brings us right to the core of this whole thing you wanted us to look at. Is Spike Lee actually holding the Knicks back, specifically, like, when it comes to team chemistry, focus? The point gets raised that, look, when a big-name team struggles, people look for scapegoats.
No way.
And his celebrity, his visibility, makes him an easy target.
Yeah, and even now, in this really successful 2025 playoff run, which, let's be honest, has been hit hard by injuries, key guys like Brunson, OG Anunoby.
Right, big losses.
Even so, some fans online, according to the sources, still try to link losses or bad stretches to Spike. Either his absence or his supposed influence, that Game 1 loss to the Pacers. With Halliburton's taunt and Spike's empty seat, that definitely fueled chatter on X about, like, a bad luck thing.
And then there's the argument about pressure from his criticism affecting, maybe subtly, decision-making. Like his public calls for trades or changes. Remember those tweets pushing management to get a star back in 2022? Could that add another layer of external pressure on the front office, on management?
The material suggests this intense scrutiny could, theoretically, maybe push the team towards rush moves that disrupt cohesion. The team's current setup, relying so heavily on Brunson and Randle, maybe without that clear third star, sometimes that's framed as, well, a consequence of strategy may be influenced by fan and media pressure.
Yeah.
And Lee's a loud voice in that.
Right. If players feel like they're constantly playing for approval from famous fans, instead of just focusing on the game plan, could that erode focus?
The possibility raised.
Oh, okay, but the material also gives us some pretty strong evidence that his direct impact might be, well, way overstated.
Definitely.
Just look at the 2024-25 regular season. 50 wins, 32 losses.
That number 2 seed in the East, that's solid.
That's clear progress under Thibs, right. And it happened with Spike courtside most nights, active on social media the whole time.
Exactly.
Right.
And their playoff wins this year. Yeah, getting past the Pistons, then the Celtics. Even with Lee occasionally away, like for Khan, that powerfully suggests the team's success is fundamentally about the players they have, the coaching, the strategy.
Much more than about the dynamics around one fan, even a super famous one.
Yeah, it seems that way.
So is Lee's perceived influence maybe more of a symptom? A symptom of the crazy media spotlight and the intense fan passion that just always surrounds the Knicks?
Rather than a primary cause of their performance dips?
Yeah.
The performance data, the team results presented in the material, they really do lean that way, strongly.
Okay, let's touch on the psychological angle that came up too. Fans like Spike Lee can undeniably boost morale, right? Adrenaline.
Oh, for sure.
Studies mentioned in the sources suggest home crowds can genuinely lift performance by a noticeable amount just through sheer energy, maybe accountability too.
Right.
And his passion at MSG, it definitely contributes to that whole home court advantage thing during wins.
Yeah. However, the flip side noted is that too much scrutiny, especially from a celebrity fan, could potentially trigger anxiety. Particularly for, say, younger players. Guys maybe not used to that level of spotlight.
Yeah, someone maybe still finding their footing, getting fewer playoff minutes, perhaps.
Right. That kind of pressure could be different.
That makes intuitive sense. Yet the material also suggests his criticism, even when it's sharp, might also serve as motivation. In a weird way.
How so? Like reverse psychology?
Maybe. Like his public frustration after that Game 1 loss, even though he was at Cannes, could that fuel a desire in the players to, prove him and other doubters wrong?
Interesting. There's historical precedent for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Knicks actually did rally back in '94 after Miller's taunt. They won that series against the Pacers. Patrick Ewing dominated Game 7.
Right.
So the question gets posed, could Spike's vocal nature, his criticism, maybe inspire a similar kind of like defiant focus in 2025?
But then the potential for distraction always comes back up, especially in these high-pressure playoff moments.
Yeah.
The material highlighted the Knicks' late-game collapse in Game 1, blowing that lead.
Yeah, rough ending.
And it noted, pointedly, that it happened while Lee was absent.
Okay.
So some online speculation, as referenced in the sources, wondered, hey, if he had been there, would his presence maybe have helped keep the crowd's energy up, keep the team focused during that critical stretch?
It's hard to say, right? Without detailed stats linking his attendance to specific results, which the material admits is basically impossible to track definitively. It stays mostly speculative. Guesswork.
Yeah. And fan sentiment, you can see it in the posts shared. It's clearly split. Some see him as a distraction, even a curse. Others see him as, like, essential part of the Knicks' identity, their energy.
Totally divided.
And the context of these 2025 playoffs, it's really fresh ground for this whole debate.
For sure. The Knicks reaching the conference finals, it's a huge deal for the franchise. Been a long time.
And Lee's absence in Game 1 was definitely a talking point. Covered everywhere, New York Times, etc. But even absent, his virtual presence, his reactions online kept him right in the middle of the conversation.
And Halliburton echoing the Miller taunt, that directly linked right now to that historical flashpoint. ESPN reported on that connection.
So looking ahead, if the Knicks manage to turn this series around, his return to MSG could become this huge rallying point, could totally shift the narrative again.
Absolutely. And when you just look at the team data presented, Brunson's unbelievable scoring, playing through injury,
Incredible.
other guys stepping up when needed, it really just underscores that performance is driven by the roster, by the coaching,
Yeah.
and the viewership numbers. The reported jump in playoff viewership, it's significant. That shows that overall fan enthusiasm, Spikes included, is clearly boosting engagement for the team. It's not hurting it in that sense.
Right, so maybe that Game 1 collapse is the key instance where the debate about focus and external influence gets talked about most intensely in the material you shared.
Seems like it. That's the flashpoint.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean? We've taken a pretty deep dive into the material you gave us. Looked at Spike Lee's, incredibly complex relationship with the Knicks from a bunch of angles. His history, the passion, those moments that grab headlines, the whole debate about pressure versus motivation, and trying to place it all in the context of the team's journey, especially these really high-stakes 2025 playoffs.
And based on everything we've pulled from these sources, it's genuinely clear there's no easy answer, no simple yes or no on whether he's a net positive or, a burden. His passion, everyone acknowledges it. Players like Brunson say it contributes hugely to that electric vibe at MSG. But it's also true. His high-profile critiques, the courtside controversies, they absolutely spark debate. They raise valid questions about potential distraction, especially when the heat is on.
And the material ultimately seems to suggest the team's performance in 2025 is much more directly tied to, like, the basics. Roster health or lack thereof, coaching strategy under Thibs, player execution on the court.
Right. More than one fan's presence. The evidence points towards his direct impact on wins and losses, probably being less significant than the media hype around him suggests. He might be more of a lightning rod, for all the existing fan passion and scrutiny that always surrounds the Knicks.
Less a primary cause of their struggles.
Yeah, seems that way based on this.
So this whole exploration, it really leaves an important question for you, the listener, to keep thinking about. In this incredibly intense, scrutinized world of pro sports, how much can any single fan, doesn't matter how famous, how passionate, how vocal, truly influence the really complex dynamics inside a team?
Yeah, the chemistry, the focus, the pure execution you need to win at that level.
Think about the psychological bits we touched on. That delicate balance, right, where celebrity support could boost morale, maybe confidence, versus that intense scrutiny, sometimes critical, potentially adding anxiety you just don't need.
So what stands out to you after digging into all this material with us?
Yeah.
About the power or maybe the limits of a fan's influence?
Keep that thought with you, especially as you watch the rest of these 2025 playoffs unfold.